Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Velero community meeting / open discussion. Today is March 2nd, 2021, or March 366, 2020, depending on how you're counting. So welcome, everyone, to another March. We hope this one will be a little less stressful than the last March we had. Today we got some status updates. We'll see if we got some discussion topics, and then we have a ton of awesome contributor shoutouts. So let's get started with Bridget.
Hi everyone. So for the last week, I've been continuing to work on multiple credential support. I think I have most of the code changes in place, but the focus now is getting the docs and ET tests written. I was slightly blocked and interrupted this week due to some internal build issues that we had, which Nolan has mentioned as well. But I already, Carlisi has already done some reviews on the existing PRs that are there. So there's one in Velero, which she has approved. So if I could get another approval on that, that would unblock the follow-up PR that which is dependent on this one for the restic support. So please, maintainers, can I get a review on that? That would be super helpful. Thank you very much.
I'll look at that.
Oh,
go ahead.
Thanks very much, Nolan. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to report other than that.
Just a quick comment. I looked at it very briefly, and it has a merge conflict right now.
Oh no. Well, I will resolve that.
So if this gets in, you can continue work on this one. This is currently in draft, right?
Yeah, it's in draft because there's no point in reviewing it until the other one goes in, because I figured that if there were changes required on the earlier one, they would cause changes in this one as well. So rather than getting people to review this one as well, I mean, they can in case there's something else, but I figured it'd be best just to get the other one in first.
Sounds good. All right. Any questions, comments for Bridget? Okay. Nolan.
Yeah, so last week I did not get a whole lot of progress on upstream. As Bridget mentioned, we were both looking at some internal TKG build issues. Basically, TKG is getting ready for its 1.3 release, and we had to make sure all the Velero repos were up to snuff in our build. And that took a couple days. So I did get some reviews done and merged a few outstanding PRs yesterday. One of them being Carlisia's longstanding download request controller. So that is now in. It's one less release blocker. And I think that's what I've got in terms of the roadmap right now.
All right. So question on the roadmap, since this is the first meeting of the month, where we were planning to talk about the roadmap today. Are you okay talking about the roadmap and the discussion topics?
I think we can talk about rough ideas that we have for 1.7. We can kind of yank those out. I will try to get something typed in for that.
That sounds great. All right. Any other questions, comments for Nolan? Okay. Ashish?
For me, I've been working on making the end-to-end tests part of our release pipeline so that they get run more periodically. And so I got that done last week. I also wrote up a document for others on the Velero team to be able to run these jobs, run these tests. This is using like internal infrastructure and internal platforms. So unfortunately, we will not be able to make this runnable by other folks in the community at the moment. So that's where we are with the E2E tests as of now. I have I'm going to be looking at some PRs, and I also have some free cycles if anybody wants to pair or needs help.
Question on that, Ashish. You are the end-to-end tests. Will they always be tied to internal infrastructure, or can we run those in public later on?
At the moment, we don't have any plans of making it run in publicly accessible infrastructure.
Whoa. Stop.
Go
End-to-end
ahead.
tests are currently part of the open source. They run, you can run them by hand.
Yes.
The
Yes.
build, the automatic cluster creation, that stuff is internal at the moment. But certainly if you set up a cluster, you can run your tests against it.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, thanks for catching that. I thought it was understood that the E2E tests are in code. The code is available for anybody who has a cluster to run. The release pipeline, the frequently running E2E tests is now part of the internal pipeline, which runs on the internal infrastructure.
And I am speaking with the TKG release team to get that set up so that we can have one pipeline that feeds into GitHub. But that's really early days, and they're not quite ready with all the networking permissions and things like that. There's certain things they need to be on the internal network for, and they don't want to expose it to the internet. So
which is pretty much having one release pipeline release everywhere.
Okay, so that does that. So I'm just thinking here. So for releases, we're using the internal infrastructure. Is that correct?
For TKG releases, yes.
For TKG releases, okay, not for OSS releases of Velero.
There is nothing that will not yet, because we haven't had a release with the E2E tests yet.
Okay, because I want to make sure that we utilize external systems as much as possible for the OSS releases.
Yeah. We will use these internal tests as signals for releases, whether they can be run from outside or from outside or not.
So one of the things that we've done in the past, so like the vSphere plugin has internal test infrastructure that's triggered by updates to GitHub. So any new changes, for example, that come in, any pull requests, actually get run through the tests automatically, and the output of the test is returned to GitHub. So I think that's the direction we want to go in. Now, you know, the infra to like spin up a cluster, all that stuff, that actually requires things like credentials, which I don't think we're ever going to put public, because that means that you could use our credentials to spend money. So we're not going to do that. We will try and make as much of this stuff available. Like, for example, TKG is open source. And so if we can build things that work around TKG, someone else can use their credentials to run things. But we can't, there's a bunch of stuff we can't put public because it's not public. I mean, even not proprietary.
Yeah, I think that's okay. What you just said there, that the results are published up on GitHub, I think that's the important part. Because I just want to make sure that no test results are hidden away from anyone.
Yeah, so I mean, our goal is to have the testing run like automatically whenever you put the pull request, and get feedback and say, hey, these are the tests that didn't pass. Then you can run the tests by hand until you get them to pass, or submit a new change request.
Okay. Sounds good.
So is there going to be some sort of automation then, so that I can retest if there's a flaky test? Like what are we going to have like a?
Good question.
We're going to have like a Prow robot set up to do this, or
so you're about 3 steps down the road from where we are. So yes, we'd like to have all those kind of things, and that's, I think we're getting to the point where we're actually building out a test suite, and like right now, like on the plugin, you can just push another, you can just push a change to your pull request, and it reruns the tests. But also it should be very easy to run these tests locally or in a cluster of your own. So that would really be the goal, is that you should be running the tests before you submit the pull request. So there shouldn't be any surprises.
And again, we have people internally working on making all these basically exposed as external workers for GitHub Actions. So the plan would be to feed those results into GitHub via GitHub Actions, and then you could see the results, the log for that, and rerun it. The system that they're going to be using is part of what we did for the internal TKG builds this week, moving everything over to that new system. But I don't think it's quite ready yet in terms of network exposure. But yes, all of this is where we want to go. We're not trying to hide anything. It's just going to be easier to start it this way, and then expose it, because VMware has a lot of other open source projects that we want to test this way too.
Yeah, and what might be interesting is look at things like, for example, we'll be testing against the resources and clouds that we target. But for example, we're probably not going to set up an OpenShift cluster to test against. But if that's something that Red Hat was interested in doing, I don't see why we couldn't tie that into our GitHub pipeline to, for example, run tests against the vSphere, the VMware set of tests. Let's kick off a set of tests in Red Hat Infra and pull all the results back together. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I wanted to say something, but my throat is itchy. So give me 1 second. I think the benefit that folks can get is if you have tests that you would like us to run as part of release, add to our E2E tests and they get run and you get them run for free. Right now it is internal, but you will have access to the results, so you can use that. And I would like to say that you can, the way to look at it is you have tests or we have tests and we get them run somewhere, and it really should not matter where those tests run because we know what those tests are running.
I'll be right back. I need to go check something here in the house. Please continue.
Yep. Any other questions folks may have on the E2E tests?
What versions of Kubernetes are those running against?
Nope, sorry, go ahead.
Right now, whatever is spun up by default using cluster API is what gets picked. I'm sure there's a way to configure the versions of Kubernetes. Are there specific versions that folks may be interested in having tested?
Well, we should be testing all the versions that we support. I mean, we need to get there, but we should be building out this matrix.
Yeah, we will get there, but like, where do we start? Is
I think what you've got so far is awesome, and thank you.
Yeah, and I think
so all the feature comments are great, but this is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, this is more than what we had before, and also I think since this is based on the TKG testing pipelines, it's probably Kubernetes 120 by default. That's my guess. But I don't know, just based on what I know TKG is going to support in the next release coming out this month.
And I was going to say, if you want to start adding other versions, and you don't want to spin up everything, you might want to do, the default, the oldest and the newest that Velero supports. So, do 112, do 120, just kind of pick get the range that way if you don't really want to test everything in between.
Yep.
So I did have a question about the end-to-end tests. Last time I looked at them, they were installing Velero using Velero install, which I believe is being deprecated? Is there going to be some other mechanism for like, and it was in the before each stanza of your of the BDD test? Is there going to be, are we going to take that out of the end-to-end test and make the install separate from before each test is run?
So there's an option that got merged in that lets you not install as part of the test. So if you want to do an install your own setup, like with a Helm chart or however you like to do it, you can do that, and then the tests won't automatically install. Eventually, it's going to be whichever is our mainstream installer. So I don't think a Velero install is necessarily going away. We've been talking about which direction it's going to go in, but
yeah, the earlier plan was to take Velero install and kind of split it up and deprecate the literal Velero install command, but we would still have some sort of installer that would place bits in there and let you configure. I put an item in for the roadmap discussion on like what we're currently thinking on that. But the TLDR right now is to make it based on Carvel, which is another VMware open source project. There's other people here at VMware working on that kind of thing. So it probably will be a wrapper, is what I'm envisioning right now. But we're kind of looking for ways to reduce the number of ways to install it while still giving everybody the options. So if we have a Carvel way and a Helm way, that's probably pretty dang good. So yes, we're going to whatever the new thing is, whether it's the literal string Velero install or something else, that will be part of the end-to-end testing for how it gets installed.
Is it? I think it should be. I guess I was asking if we should. Maybe this is better as an issue. I can file an issue instead.
Yeah,
or a discussion topic.
Yeah. I'm curious what else you have to say on that, but we can put that as a discussion topic or an issue.
All right. Let me share here again. Any other questions, comments on end-to-end tests? I'm sure we'll have more discussions on this topic in the coming meetings as well. All right, Dave.
Yeah, so we had a really good discussion last week on the upload progress monitoring, and so that's good. So I've got to take that feedback and got some research to do and some updates to the doc and some thinking about different paths to take there. And then this week, working on that, working on going through and just reviewing all the feature requests and trying to start marking down, big little, put some t-shirt sizes on them as to how much change they are and how much work they are. That's
and that discussion is up on YouTube now as well, in our YouTube playlist. So if you want to check out the recording of that discussion, you can do so. Any questions, comments for Dave? All right. Let's dive into the discussion topics. So just as a rehash of last week, we had a lengthy discussion based off of findings from Frankie and Raphael. So new documentation has been merged for this. So thank you so much, Frankie, for doing this.
Thanks very much for the interesting discussion and quick reviews.
Awesome stuff. All right. So our main discussion topic of today is going to be the roadmap. Nolan.
Yeah. So I'm going to get some links here. Just one second. So the first item I have on here, I think folks may have heard us talking about a Velero debug command. And there is an issue for this. I don't have the number off the top of my head. But this is also something Velero support really wants. So, or not Velero support, VMware support. So we have this big list of commands that you can run to do troubleshooting and things like that. But internally here at VMware, we have, I guess not internally, as part of the Tanzu open source portfolio, we have this crash diagnostics program. And what this is a runner for Starlark, which if you're familiar with Bazel, the build engine, it's a dialect of Python that Google made. And this basically allows you to run local commands and grab the output. So we can do things like Velero debug, or I'm sorry, Velero version to grab all the versions of Velero. It has functions in there to automatically grab stuff out of the Kubernetes system. You can also run commands directly against the nodes themselves if you've got them. So we were looking at Velero debug, we're going to write it, and then realized crash D does everything we want. So why reinvent the wheel? So we're thinking we have a Starlark script already, and we're thinking with 1.7, what we're going to do is use the crash diagnostics Golang library. So there's just a simple, from the outside, there's a simple one function call to run a Starlark script. And maybe looking at with Go 1.16, bundling the crash diagnostic script itself inside the Velero binary so that people can dump all this information about their Velero installation and get those results. So we need to do a little bit more design work on what that'll look like, but it'll be based on this crash diagnostics and Starlark language. And we've already gotten a couple issue requests in there based on some things I hit when I was writing the initial Starlark script. The next item we're really heavily considering, this one maybe a little bit more controversial or not done in 1.7, but getting Velero's own CSI snapshot support to GA with Kubernetes. I believe it was 1.20. CSI snapshotting is now GA in Kubernetes. So we're going to try to do some more polishing and move Velero closer to GA on snapshot support. Next, a big one that we're having some other design, like we're having at least 3 other designs stack up behind this one, is getting plugin versioning done. And by the way, this is not necessarily in priority order right now. This is kind of as I thought of them. So plugin versioning, allowing Velero to provide version info about the plugin API and allowing plugins to say, this is the plugin API I support. That way we can open up things like adding new functions to the interface without having to add them everywhere or add a bunch of no ops, giving stuff like timeout, like changing arguments, things like that. So plugin versioning is big because it unlocks a bunch of other work. Ashish, I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, I have some ideas on plugin versioning. Maybe I'll put that together somewhere and share it with everyone. Okay.
The next thing is snapshot uploading progress. So this is a design that Dave was just talking about, where we can upload snapshots in the background. This is particularly useful for on-prem scenarios like vSphere. I'm sure if there was a Ceph driver, it could use that as well. But we've already got a design out for that. The next one is the manifest data structure that I mentioned last week. This is another unlocking more work. The manifest data structure itself, in terms of writing it, I don't think will be difficult, but I want to get the data structure I want to make sure we have all the proper information in the data structure before we move forward. So that way we don't have to have a bunch of different backup version revisions. But future work that would use it includes things like a dry run command for backup and restore, doing more complex restore logic, particularly like as an example, cluster API, where we can say, instead of just restoring objects based on their group and kind, we can more intelligently say, hey, before you restore this object, restore its owners. So it has something to reference. And there was a third scenario that I can't remember on here. That's in the design doc, which I will link. The next one that we've been looking at new base images to remove, basically remove the attack surface. Right now we ship full Ubuntu. So we're looking at moving to Distroless for Velero and definitely the plugins, because the plugins right now they don't need to be a full Ubuntu. This would, I think the only question we have, which I think Dave may have done some tests on this, is whether or not the rustic support would work, since it needed a shell environment. But I think those were looking good. So
yeah, that actually ran.
Okay, cool.
The e-tests ran anyway with the rustic on the Distroless.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think we determined that the OS exec function within Go doesn't require shell support, so it should be fine to use something, use an image which doesn't have a shell.
Nice, cool. And these are like the Google Distroless, so we don't have to. It's not just plain Scratch, because just plain Scratch does include stuff like time zone data or
certs.
Certs, yep, certs and Etsy password, that kind of stuff. So it's Distroless, but it's still like Unixy. It's not just Scratch, which is basically a tarball that Docker can install. And going back to the Velero install discussion, we are looking at ways to use Carvel for Velero installation. Part of the reason I mentioned we wanted to do a wrapper command was so that folks didn't have to install all of Carvel. We're gonna work with the Carvel team and some other folks here at VMware to make sure we can install Velero without having to install like Carvel on your own, like local command. Jonas.
Yeah, just a quick note. It's the pronunciation is Carvel.
It's Carvel.
Like marble.
Marvel.
Yeah.
Yes, I keep messing up.
It's an easy
I
one.
keep thinking, isn't that like the ice cream though, Carvel?
So Carvel is the ice cream.
The ice cream is good.
Yes, the ice cream is good. Carvel is the shipbuilding technique. And that's what we're referring to here. So Carvel, ice cream, Carvel, shipbuilding.
Aha. I prefer the ice cream. But we're going to keep nautical connotations. And Carvel is a collection of tools. I'll admit I'm not super familiar with all of them, but these are from, I believe, formerly the K14S project, if folks were familiar with that. So this stuff was adopted by VMware, and it's got a whole suite of utilities for doing Kubernetes building and installation and templating and stuff like that. And I'll do one more item, then we can open up for questions. Something Dave and I were talking about is also making a more detailed test plan that enumerate this. This is separate from the actual tests themselves, but just saying a document that says this is what we test. This is the matrix we test of Kubernetes versions, Kubernetes versions to Velero versions to whatever dimension we need to put on there. But getting a lot more specific on what we need to test and like what scale, like how many objects we're generating and how many volumes we're backing up and things like this. So we want to get better at polishing that up so that folks can rely on Velero as an enterprise solution. So that's a big dump of what we're thinking about. This is not set in stone, but I think for 1.7 we're pretty well set. Not entirely set, but firm. So I'm curious what people's thoughts are.
Any questions, comments? Everything looks good? Sorry, Sean.
I was wondering if this is where I could bring up my concerns around, or the things I had around the testing, which was that it seems to me that like we should have test suites that test. Sorry, let me back up. I'm trying to ask a question of why we, for each individual test of a backup and restore, we are installing Velero and uninstalling Velero and removing Velero after a test runs, rather
That
than.
was pretty much just an artifact of the way the tests were written first round. And I was going to take that out, except that for Frankie's stuff right now, that relies on a feature flag.
Yep.
And so until the feature flag is gone, we're going to need to install and uninstall to run the resource version group APIs. So that's why it's doing it for the moment. Long term, you're right. It should be like before the suite, it should install Velero and then do a bunch of stuff and then uninstall at the end.
But I think there is value in giving each test in its own clean instance of Velero to run. Right? We don't want one test kind of stepping over another test's toes to kind of screw things up. So
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, but that would be much closer to a real world use case than not, right?
Yeah,
you don't
in the real world,
you don't have a special instance of Velero for for each individual backup. So why wouldn't we want the test to run in the same instance?
Yeah, I get that point, but the test writers are going to be different. The tests that you write may kind of conflict the tests that I may write or somebody else may write. So that would require some level of coordination, and like especially with things like feature flags to test different modes of Velero. It would be useful to give each test its own clean instance of Velero. Well, when to come to your point of in the real world, this is how it happens. Maybe we should have a test scenario where we have multiple workloads being backed up. That alone can be a test scenario.
Or we can just have a flag that may say, optionally install Velero. So
yeah,
it makes sense. So both viewpoints are correct. So making sure that, for example, the tests don't get unexpected dependencies between each other is also important. So, for example, if test B always runs after test A and test B starts to rely on test A doing things, that's bad. So, but at the same time, test B, not dealing with the conditions that test A may leave hanging around is also bad. So I think we should look at probably having an option for both and doing runs where Velero gets installed always, where Velero gets installed most of the time with a flag maybe for certain tests that say, no, I absolutely positively need a clean environment, or I need a feature flag, so therefore I need to have it installed and uninstalled. Those are all welcome additions and ideas, I think.
Yeah. I think the way we have it right now is good, giving everyone the flexibility of either choosing Velero to be preserved throughout the running of the tests or like reinstalled before and after each test. I think what we have is good from my perspective, but happy to stand corrected. Sean, does that
Yeah,
address
I think
your concern?
yeah, I think I was just going to advocate for something kind of what Dave was saying, which is do something similar to what Kubernetes does, which is, you have some tests that are serial and you have some tests that are parallelized, and the serial tests need to be run one after the other, but the parallelized tests could be run in any order. And that would be probably how I would advocate that we would do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the trick in testing usually is you want to have some randomness to trigger situations you didn't think of. But the randomness also needs to be reproducible so that you don't get Heisenbugs,
Yeah, I think so. Go Mega, I think, or Ginkgo, right, has the ability to print out the seed value that it uses for parallelization, so you can rerun the same exact set of tests in the exact same order, which is helpful in this regard. Because of the same thing you just said, right? Which is like you need to be able to reproduce those. Wait, which order did these run in?
Yeah, so right now we have like 2 tests, so we need a few more tests.
This is all set up to, we all actually just need to go write some tests. Yes, agreed.
I'm sorry, my Zoom crashed, but I wanted to jump in on the comment about doing a full wipe between each test. I don't think we have to do either or, because I think we can define like individual subsuites to say this suite is installed with this set of arguments, and we want to run it in a purposefully entangled way. And we can also, so we could say install this with this set of flags and things, run all these tests inside of that. So we can group it. We should be able to, I hope, to say this suite is installed with this set of components and flags. This other suite is installed with this other set, and this suite, we wipe it every time and do it. So sorry if that already came up, but I was just thinking it'll add to runtime, but I don't think we have to necessarily choose either or.
I would just advocate for some way that somebody who is installing Velero a different way would be able to still run the end-to-end tests with installing it however they choose, rather than having to use the install from the end-to-end test is really what I want to.
Right,
it's
so
one of the things that I am concerned about. Yeah,
that's there. So there's a flag right now to let you not install.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not everybody uses Velero install. Yeah.
So vis-a-vis the roadmap itself, so I think we want to start getting in a little more formality in terms of the stages of when things go in. So like we're at the point right now where we really recommend, like if there are community planned features and so forth, this is a great time to bring them up and say, hey, we'd like to get this into the 1.7 release, get it onto the roadmap here. We're going to have I'll publish out what the different phases of the release process are going to be, but we will have a point in time where we say, you know what, that feature is not on the roadmap. Thank you for your pull request. That's going to go into the next release. So we're going to try and get some, control over, or, just, some structure around when things come in, and make everybody aware of when that's happening. So now's a great time to say, hey, this is something we really need, or this is something that we want to bring to the table and get it into this release.
Yep. And kind of to Dave's point, we're thinking about, so it's no secret we've delayed 1.6 a bunch. So in order to kind of fix that going forward, I think we're going to look at establishing a date and having that date be a cutoff. If stuff is not complete by that date, then it just goes in the next one. It goes in a patch release. It does not. So we can get better about shipping consistent releases. So in terms of time frame, I'm guessing we haven't really decided, but I'm guessing we're going to aim for a May-June release on 1.7 roughly. But yeah, we're also going to try to be more diligent about what's there is there, and that's what we ship as long as it's passing tests. So part of the motivation for getting the structure and stuff out there is so we can get on that kind of train leaves the station model.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments regarding the roadmap? All right. Well, we'll get back to this, and as we've talked about before, so for status updates going forward, we're looking at items working towards the roadmap items to make sure that we're consistently working towards the completing those roadmap items as well. All right. Next up, we have.
It is fair to call out that this is a rough roadmap, and
yes,
it's not set in stone at the moment, but it'll kind of solidify with time. So if folks want to make any changes or propose changes, I think I don't know when do we have a cutoff date for that?
So Dave and I are really trying to get a meeting with our manager. That's basically been kicked around for a bunch of different reasons. Last week, we were going to meet about this last week, and I was really hoping to have something much, much firmer by today, but we had the build issues that came up. I want to give a little buffer. I would really want the roadmap to be pretty much finalized by the end of March, if not sooner. I mean, that admittedly is a long time, but just based on how things have been going. I'll also say March 15th, we have a new PM joining the team. So that will help us get a little bit more structure around this. But I would say if you have something you want to contribute to Velero in the V1.7 timeframe, please let us know on Slack. GitHub discussions, make an issue, something like that, raise it to our attention. The kind of expectation is if you ask for that, we'll put you on to implement or do the design doc or something. So yeah, in terms of final delivery date, absolute latest end of March, but I'm hoping much earlier.
Awesome. Now let's do contributor shoutouts.
I want to answer this one question that Vinu asked.
Sure.
There are no plans to start a company around Velero. The Velero will be for the foreseeable future VMware product and project, and there may be parts we donate to the CNCF. We're talking about splitting up Velero such that like the Kubernetes serialization and installation parts are separate from the scheduling and kind of policy management. But no, there's no plans to start a company around Velero. Okay, so for the contributor shout outs, got a bunch from Frankie, and I did not organize them, but I'm going to do the first and the last one. So this first one was documentation about the selection criteria when you define an applies to function on your plugins. So this just says, make sure you use a fully qualified name for disambiguation. And the other one, that was the discussion topic from last week. And this change makes the Helm chart closer to how Velero install works. So we're kind of, we had two sets of labels. The Helm chart did one and Velero installed it another. This makes sure that at the very least they have the component equals Velero label on both. So thank you very much, Frankie, for both of those changes. They're super helpful. This next one was from Slavina, and this was in order to prevent GCP disks from being marked partially as failed, so this basically makes snapshotting on GCP a little bit more reliable, and at the very least, giving us more information. But it passes down Velero tags, and yeah, it's a change specifically to GCP, not to the rest of Velero. So thank you very much, Slavina. The next one. Yes, from Justin. This is documentation on the minimum required permissions for Azure, which is very much appreciated for going in and pulling those out such that we, when people install stuff on Azure, they don't have to make everything wide open. So thank you very much, Justin. This one's from Tarek on the Helm chart, and the QP, the client, I believe it's queries per second and burst rate. This allows for more tuning of those via the Helm chart, and this is helpful because there's some performance issues that you can run into on the Kubernetes API server, where if your QPS and burst rate are too low, it will report errors in finding resources. So this allows for better scaling and for better tuning for your particular API server. Thank you very much, Tarek. I think these are mostly Helm charts. This one I did not get a chance to look at before the meeting, so I think this, is to ensure placing Restic on the correct nodes on the Restic daemon set rather than just throwing it everywhere. So thank you very much, Peter. And then finally, another Helm chart addition. Looks like Cyril added the ability to annotate all of the Velero components, especially the deployment and daemon set, which it can be helpful depending on how your deploy environment looks. So thank you very much, Cyril.
Awesome. And yeah, that concludes our meeting today. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you everyone for the lively discussion around the testing and roadmap items. Really appreciate it. Have a fantastic rest of the week, everyone, and see you all next week.
See ya.